Okay, well, I guess everybody's here. We'll get started. How to best recognize and counter a delusion? Well, that's a hard question. If it's a delusion, then, how to best counter a delusion? If it's a delusion, then you're not seeing it clearly to begin with. So you have to be able to see it clearly to then counter it. Yeah. And I think this is what the practice itself is best for. In this practice, there's not really lots of like eureka moments where all of a sudden you're one way, or you have this amount of insight, and then all of a sudden you jump up and go, wow, all of a sudden you eureka. It's a lot of little insights that come gradually over years and years and years of practice. So over years and years of practice, as you're developing your practice, you start to chip away at the delusion. This is, the Buddha calls the mind, he says, luminous is the mind, but clouded with defilements it is, right? So you can think about the mind as, I like to use the simile of a lighthouse, right? A lighthouse that is totally filled with gunk and dust and dirt all around. And in that lighthouse, when the glass is all filled with gunk and dust and dirt, not much light is getting out. Right? But this practice, this Noble Eightfold Path, what this allows us to do is to gradually chip away and clean those lighthouse glass until there's no defilement left. There's nothing blocking the inner light of the mind. The Buddha said the mind is luminous. So I guess my best answer to that is the practice. Now, there are some times in the practice where it's an awkward in between, because you start to see things, you start to see your unskillful habits, but you don't yet know how to let go of them or change them. So you're like, oh man, I shouldn't really be doing this, but you still do it anyway. Unfortunately, I'm well versed with that, I know. And that's hard too. I don't have any quick, easy answers for that. My only answer is to watch, to observe. With this whole practice, what we're trying to do is to see dukkha. But we're also, to do that, we have to see everything else. The Buddha taught us to know three things about pretty much everything, all of our experiences, everything we do. He taught us to know the gratification, the danger, and the escape of these three things. The gratification is that whatever we do, there's a pleasurable side to that. We do it for a reason, because we like it, right? The danger is that whatever we like will change. The experience will change. And the release of that, the escape from that, is letting go. So every kind of experience we have, every kind of delusion we have to know this gratification, danger, and escape. And I guess the biggest delusion, obviously, to Buddhism is the fact that we think we have a permanent self. That's the grand delusion. That is the delusion in greed, hatred, and delusion. And again, that doesn't come, it's not one day, oh, I have this self, and then all of a sudden snapping, oh, I don't have a self anymore, this is awesome. No, it comes very slowly, very gradually. So, if you want to work towards delusion, look. When Bhante Panya, when he did his meditation, when he taught you the meditation, he says, look for impermanence. You look for impermanence, excuse me, in your experience. You look at what attaching to that experience does. And you look to see if there's a self in that experience. Where is this thing that we call a self? Can you find it anywhere? Can you find it anywhere in these 5 aggregates? Those contemplations and wisdom developed from your practice, that is the destruction of those delusions. The plans, thoughts, and goals, even wholesome and beneficial, keep us drawn into samsara. Yes and no. It depends on what those plans are. Even as a monastic, I have goals. I mean, my ultimate goal obviously is to end everything. Or well, maybe that's not the way to say it. My ultimate goal is to become awakened and to end the cycle. But of course, I have other goals as well, and it's not just for me. And the Buddha also said it's not just becoming an awakened being is not just for you; it's for everybody. And anybody practicing this practice is not just for you; it's for everybody. So you can have these goals, and that's a skillful thing. It's helping you lead down a skillful, a skillful path. Even the Buddha had to have plans. He wandered around and taught for 40 some odd years. He had to plan something. So it's not necessarily that planning and having goals is bad. It's more that, I guess what I would suggest is to watch your expectations for your plans and your goals. You set a goal, you set a plan. You want to go out and do something for the world, or you want to just do something for yourself or your family. And you set that goal in mind, and you work towards that. And life happens. It doesn't work out the way you wanted it to work out. And we had these expectations, we wanted it was supposed to work out this way, it didn't work out. And because we have these expectations, we cause ourselves to suffer because of the change and how things didn't work out how you wanted them to. So there's no problem in planning and goals. Somebody had to, Bhante Ji and the monastics had to plan to make this building, right? You have to plan, you have to do these kind of things. But I think that as long as you're planning and trying to move towards goals that are beneficial for yourself and for others, then you actually are leading away from samsara. Slowly, and very slowly, very gradually, but you're leading away from it. So always keep in mind your intention and keep in mind your actions. Examine what your actions will do. Will they be beneficial for yourself and beneficial for others? Keep that in mind and you can't go wrong. Sometimes when meditating I get moving shapes and flashes of color. Are these just distractions, or can I use them as an object of my meditation or my concentration? Now, sometimes I think, my meditation's really boring. But people always talk about all kinds of interesting experiences in their meditation, and I never have any of this stuff. From what I've heard talking to meditators for many years, there's a wide variety of experiences that can happen. And I guess my advice to that was pretty much the same advice that I've heard almost unanimously most monastics and lay teachers as their response to that. It's a phenomenon that's happening and it's part of your meditation. Examine it, observe it, and then just let it go. Don't get attached to it. Don't, you can, it says, can I use this as an object of concentration? I'm not necessarily sure you could use it as an object of concentration, because the object of concentration is supposed to be an object that is a neutral object. Like the reason why the breath is a perfect object of a meditative object is because it's neutral and it's always there. These flashing lights are not there. They're going to come and they're going to go. So if you switch your awareness to these experiences, it's actually more of an insight development than a concentration development. You're examining what's going on in your mind and your body while these experiences are happening. So if you examine them and analyze them and watch them with insight, and then let them go. Don't try to hold on to them. Even in meditation, we cause ourselves suffering by holding on. Holding on to the wonderful, cool, meditative experiences. Meditation technique followed here involves touch, sense of the six senses. Two other senses are still active. They are ears and mind. Sight, smells, taste, not active. Can we use the ears as the basis for meditation? Will that give you insight? Oh yes. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Without a doubt. Amazing insight. In this meditation hall, sometimes it's quiet, but there's always something going on. We're being heated right now. Can you hear that? Shh, 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 shh. You can hear that all winter. During the summer, you can hear a cacophony of crickets and birds and bugs and all kinds of stuff going on. And here you'll have, we talk about noble silence, obviously. And noble silence is usually not only just our speech, but our body movements and all that stuff. But people still make noise in here. It's people accidentally, they drop things and all of a sudden there's a sharp noise and all these kind of things. There's always noise around us. So being aware of these sounds can definitely bring you to insight. But it's not necessarily the awareness of the sounds per se, it's your reaction to the sounds. What do the sounds do when you hear a sharp sound? Or when you hear somebody go, in the meditation hall, and you're like, because why can't that person realize this breathing is really loud? What are these sounds doing to you? And I'll give you a personal experience. I had here in this very hall, years ago, there's a wonderful teacher, Ajahn Chah is his name. And one of my favorite quotes of his, it kind of sounds like a Zen koan. For years I kind of didn't understand what he was talking about. But he said, is the sound bothering you, or are you bothering the sound? And you think about that, and you say, well, that's a load of rubbish. What the heck is he talking about? And I was in here, it was during a retreat, it was in the summer, and just 3 days in a row, constantly crickets, 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 crickets. And I'm trying to meditate. And all this like aversion and this mental proliferation is just going on, these crickets, I can't meditate. And I was building up all this aversion, and I was allowing all these negative mind states to abide in me and circle around, all these narratives about what I'm going to do to the crickets, and I can't believe they're loud, and all these kind of things. And all of a sudden, that Ajahn Chah came to my mind, and I realized, holy crap, I'm bothering the sound. I'm going out to the sound with my aversion, and I'm hurting myself. And why am I doing that to myself? And since then, sound doesn't bother me much anymore. About, I'd say, 3 months ago, we had an Aposita day. Aposita day is when special days on new moons and full moons, when we come in and we meditate. We don't work, we just meditate. And I was in here and I was meditating, and there was people working on the roof. bang, 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 bang. I didn't know they were going to do that on this day, because usually, you don't think that. So they're banging, banging, and I'm hearing them, and they're, kind of yelling back and forth and cursing, all this stuff. And I'm here, and I'm just meditating. And I realized in my mind, I had no aversion to that whatsoever. It was amazing. So wow. So you realize, you see in the practice by how things happen outside, how you internalize that. That's when you see how the practice has benefited you. Now I will say though that it didn't help me get concentration, because I didn't get concentration. I sat here for an hour and a half trying to. I didn't get concentration. But I didn't have ill will. So for me that was a win. I was okay with that. So that's what, that is sound. Observe, when you hear, you can understand what sound is. Sound, light, all vibrations, all waves that are moving through the environment. And these waves are hitting your ear. And you can examine what that is like. How, does it hurt your ear? Does it agitate your mind? Doing that will help you. It will help you develop insight. So, yeah. Oh, just a poetic thank you. Okay. A rhyming thank you. I'm reading the history of the Buddha. It appears that his ability to help others only came after he received, I assume that's Dhamma, his existence depending on others. Or is that Dhamma? Only came after he received. Oh. This is depending on others. Is that so?
Maybe he means the Sujata, the woman that served the meal to the Buddha just before it became enlightened.
Yeah, I don't know how to respond to that. What I will say is that for a monastic, our existence does depend on others, and because it depends on others, we owe you guys a huge debt. Everybody who's come here for 30 years, who has supported this place, who has allowed this place to exist, who has allowed me to be here in robes. That's a huge debt. And in the suttas, one of my favorite monastics is Mahakassapa. He's considered the father of the Sangha. He's also one of the most ascetic. He's kind of like a grumpy old man. It's kind of funny a little bit. But and he says that he said that he ate the country's alms food a debtor for 7 days. So basically he became a monk, and then 7 days later he was awakened. And for those 7 days he was a debtor, meaning that it was his debt to practice and to learn the Dhamma and to help people to, in their own practice. So in that regard, at least half of our practice is helping others, is doing some kind of service. And obviously in the Dhamma, the greatest service is to teach the Dhamma. It's really one of the only ways that a monk can do dana, can be generous, because we don't own anything. We can't give you anything physical. We can only share our experiences and what we know of the Dhamma. I have noticed that you reverently walk to the altar and then walk away. Are you doing walking meditation? Yeah. The only reason why we're doing it there is because there's all of you guys here, so we don't want to take up your space, so we do it back there. I honestly prefer, when during off-retreat days, I'm over there and I walk from there to the window and back. I prefer a longer walking distance, but that's why we're back there. It's just because everybody else is here. So, yeah, it's not doing any ritual or anything like that. Why, after attaining enlightenment, did he practice austerities till he was emaciated? For 6 years did he do this and found no success, but was already enlightened? I think what would be the point? The confusion is that he did this before he was enlightened. When he left his mansions and he went out, there was two groups at the time, two main groups. There was the Brahmins, which represented pretty much the normal religious activity of the times, doing sacrifices and rituals and stuff like that. And then there were the Samanas. The Samanas were a wide variety of different teachings and groups, but they were all the ascetics that lived in the woods and shaved their heads off and wore robes and all that kind of stuff. Like the Jains were ascetics and Buddhists, and many of what the groups that you see in the suttas don't exist today anymore. But so that was so he went out and he wanted to live the life of an ascetic. And so he was just trying everything. And one of the things, he went to different teachers and he learned like jhanas and concentration and all that stuff. And he found that his goal was to find a way out of dukkha, out of samsara. And that was his goal. And those teachers, while they taught him wonderful, concentration and serenity and all that, it didn't free him. So he kept looking on. And one of the things he tried was, there's these guys hanging out in the woods and they're eating 1 grain of rice a day and they're whacking themselves and sleeping on, nails beds and all these kind of things. Well, why don't I just try that? So he tried that for 6 years. And then he realized, he ended up having like a following. There was 5 other ascetics and they were all in the woods doing these things. And one day he's just like, this is stupid. Why am I doing this to myself? This is not getting me anywhere. So he said, okay, so this is kind of where the middle path comes from. The middle path is between indulgence and austerity. The middle path is, so he took food and he became healthy again. And he didn't indulge in it, he didn't become a hedonist, he just took food and, followed the middle path. And, and also the Noble Eightfold Path is the middle path as well. So there's a couple things, when you hear the middle path, there's a couple things that fit in there. But in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the middle path, he says, is between these two extremities. Because neither of them are going to get you to the ending of dukkha. Can you please share some information about the physical location of the mind? Is it some sort of energy or frequency? Are there scientific evidence to find the location of the mind? Depends. Now, I've done actually a lot of research in this in the past year. What does science say about the mind? What does science say about consciousness? There's two camps. There's the camp of strict materialists, even though they don't have proof, they say it's part of the mind, it's part of the brain, it all comes from the brain, that's it. And then there's the other camp that says maybe it does all come from the brain, but we don't have proof of that either. So the long and short of it is, there's no clear answer to this. There's not even not scientifically, and also not in the suttas. The Buddha never answered these kind of things. Now, I will say that he never answered these kind of things in the earliest discourses. Now, there's later discourses and later writings and stuff like that where they do go involved into where all these kinds of things are. But I haven't read those, and so I can't say much about that, and I don't necessarily trust that to be the reality anyway. So the Buddha in the ancient, in the Nikayas, the Nikayas are pre-sectarian, they're pre-Mahayana, pre-Theravada. These are the oldest and the closest to the words of the Buddha that we have. We can't say they're the actual words of the Buddha, but they're the closest we're ever going to get, pending some kind of Dead Sea Scrolls kind of find where we find these, all this amazing treasury of old texts. And the Buddha actually kind of gently, sometimes not so gently, he gently refocuses our desire with regards to these things. Where's the mind? What does it do? How does it go? What goes to the next life? All these kind of things. He never answered those. He refused to answer those because he said that they were not conducive to the ending of suffering. They were conducive to vexation, conducive to confusion, conducive to intellectual circling. You can't know these things. A couple of the other examples. Is the world finite or infinite? Does an awakened being exist or not exist after death? People ask him all these kind of questions. And actually, one of the funniest responses he ever gives is, people ask him like, well, who feels? And his answer to that is, invalid question. The answer to who feels is, from feeling comes craving. So he goes to, the answer is dependent origination. So, that is, of course, to some people, that might not be good enough. It's okay. But as far as I know, science hasn't proved one way or the other. And as far as I know, there's lots of scientists that just won't touch consciousness and the mind because of that. And then there's some others that are really working hard to try to find mind in the neurons and stuff like that. I don't know. We'll have to find out and see what happens in the future. This is about asking about video and audio and stuff like that. We do upload video and we do upload audio. We upload both. Our audio is recording over there, our video records over there. So all of that does go up on the website. Our internet is really, really bad here, as you can imagine, so we don't upload it here. I do some editing and stuff on a computer, and then we have people who upload it off-site. So sometimes that takes a couple weeks. But yeah, and tomorrow morning, I'll have on the board out there, I'll have all the information. Bhavana is pretty much in the 21st century at this point. We have everything from Facebook to Twitter. So I'll put all that information out there tomorrow morning. You'll see it on the board. If one realizes Nibbana, liberation, where does one go? What destination? What place? If one doesn't realize Nibbana, where does one's karmic energy go? Is there a Tao or a sourceless source that contains everything? No. Buddha never talked about sourceless source or anything like that. He never even talked about a beginning. As a matter of fact, he said, he basically said, with my powers, I went back. Because one of his powers is the ability to see his past lives. And that's everybody who reaches the point of awakening or really deep concentration powers, that's one of the things that you are able to see, they say, is to see your past lives. And he said he went back something like 90 some odd aeons. Many periods of universal expansion and contraction, and he never found a beginning. So, for him, there's no answer to that. There's no beginning, there's no sourceless source or anything like that. There's just samsara. Now, if it doesn't realize nibbana, where does one's karmic energy go? Whatever you want to call it, the mind, karmic energy, it moves on according to its karma. So whatever, I mean, and this is I could speak for 2 hours just about this. It's a huge topic. Suffice it to say, there's no one-to-one correlation. There's no you were bad in this life, so next life you're 100%. Oh, this person was bad, he's going to go to hell next life. That's actually not a correlation. If you think, one of the examples I use is Hitler. There's no guarantee Hitler's in some kind of hell right now. He could be in a heaven realm. You never know. And that's because throughout all of these 90 plus aeons, so far back the Buddha couldn't even find it. All this time, we've been living different lives and doing all kinds of stuff, bad and good. And so this karmic web is so huge and so complicated, we can't explain it. Nobody can explain it. You have to see it. And actually, the Buddha gave 4 things. He said 4 unconjecturables. One of those was the full range of karma. You can't know the full range of karma. Only when you become awakened, then you can know that. So, as for nibbana being where do you go? You don't go anywhere. You just stop. That's it. Nibbana, again, the Buddha doesn't give all kinds of poetic, poetic like explanations and descriptions of what Nibbana is. It's beyond concepts. There is no what is Nibbana. Where do you go? There is no place. A place is a concept. When you are essentially unraveling your conditioning as a samsaric being, your conditioning as a human being, your conditioning as whatever you call yourself, male, female, American, French, whatever. You're unraveling all of that conditioning until there's nothing to unravel anymore. The Tathagata, which is the term for used for the Buddhas, is called the one thus gone. The simile to use for Nibbana is like a lamp that goes out. Not because the wind blew it out, but because there's no more fuel. Of course, that fuel is craving. So it's just gone. Do they exist after death? Do they not exist after death? Do they neither exist nor not exist after death? They all asked him these questions. And he basically said, invalid answer. No, he basically said, not valuable to the practice. And so he just encouraged us to practice. Does impermanence contain transformation? Nothing is actually destroyed, it's just transformed into something. Right or not? Actually, I was just watching a show, a physics thing, documentary about that, and this is where I'm not a scientist, and I was really bad at physics and chemistry in high school, but it fascinates me now. And I don't remember the specifics of it, but they said actually the thought of nothing actually is destroyed is actually false. I don't know the specifics of that, so I'm not going to. If I'm wrong, even just saying that, I don't want to make it even worse. But they talk about the ending of the universe, and the ending of the universe is trillions of years from now. And this is even the atoms and the particles of the atoms, of all the atoms that exist in the universe, are going to die. So I'm not quite sure that nothing is ever destroyed. Now, I mean, obviously, you can say that things do get transformed. Like, one of the basic examples of that is every atom in all of our bodies came from the heart of a dying star. billions of years ago. The chemical reactions at the time of the star dying created things like carbon and iron and all that stuff. So those atoms were part of a star. Then maybe they were part of asteroids. Now they're part of us. When we die, they'll be part of something else. So I can see that in that regard, these things are changing. The air molecules, people like Neil deGrasse Tyson, astrophysicist, he'll tell you, the air molecules you're breathing in now, there's a good chance part of those molecules were breathed in by Julius Caesar or Cleopatra, whoever your famous person or inspiring person that you want to think about. There's a good chance that they breathed in those same air molecules. So in that regard, there is this transformation, but I hesitate to say that nothing is destroyed. But then, of course, they also have these days multiverse theory, which claims that even the death of the universe doesn't mean the end. That there's many untold amounts of universes that are coming into creation and going out of creation and continuously. So, I don't know. Perhaps the earlier question about impermanence or nibbana missed the mark. The more we advance in our practice, the less our suffering, right? Depends on what you mean by advance. I mean, if advance by me like, I can sit all nice and peaceful for an hour now. Yeah, that's advance. That's not insight, though. So it depends on what you mean by advance. Every time the Buddha continued to practice and rely on the three jewels, right? The Buddha actually didn't rely on the three jewels. The Buddha, in a sutta, the Buddha says, it's important to have a refuge. And he says that he looked all around in existence to find somebody that he could take a refuge in. Somebody that was, in a way, greater than him. And he couldn't find it. He couldn't find a person. So he says, I'm going to take the Dhamma as my refuge. So even the Buddha himself took the Dhamma as a refuge. And that shows us that the Dhamma is the highest refuge. The Dhamma itself is the teacher. At the end of the Buddha's life, in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, which is in the Digha Nikaya, a wonderful sutta. It covers the last 3 months of the end of his life. And he's getting close to his death, and the monks are like, well, who's going to be the teacher when you're gone? Who's going to lead us? And he said, nobody. He says, the Dhamma. Buddha didn't say, this what I'm teaching you is called Buddhism. Buddhism is actually not even basically 100 years old, the term itself. What he called his teaching was the Dhamma and the Vinaya. The Dhamma is the teaching. The Dhamma is the truth. The Dhamma is the practice. The Vinaya is the discipline. And that's the discipline for the monastics. So what he said was, the Dhamma and the Vinaya will be your guide, will be your teacher when I'm gone. He didn't, start a line of popes or anything like that, of Buddhist popes. The Dhamma and the Vinaya. That's also, in that section is where you're going to find him say, be a lamp, be an island unto yourself. Where he is giving these final bits of advice. And it's amazing, this sutta. I don't remember what number it is in the Digha Nikaya, but it's Mahaparinibbana. If you just look up last days of the Buddha, you'll find it. So fleetingness of nirvana is not a practice issue. I think that's what it says. Well, if I can't read it, I can't really respond well to it. Ah, is Nibbana an obliteration of the self? That was also asked of the Buddha. Judging by the track record, what do you think his answer was? Does the self exist or not exist? His answer was just practice. So, it's a hard pill to swallow for people. I know, but it's been my experience with this practice is that I went from having a lot of questions to not having many questions over the course of the years of my practice. And so one of my taglines is, and I know it almost kind of sounds annoying, but one of my taglines is this: practice is the answer. What's the question? If you want to know the answer, you practice. So there's nothing, nobody says whether Nibbana is an obliteration of self. If self itself is a concept, and you're beyond concepts, what can you say about a self? What about an enlightened being still in their body, like an arhat? That's a good question. They're in their final body, right? Their karma led them to this body. They still have to, even an awakened being still has to deal with their karma. A good example is Angulimala. You might know Angulimala. He is the Buddhist serial killer. The story, I'm not going to go into the story because we're kind of running out of time. But anyway, he was a serial killer. And then he became a monk, and he became an arhat. Even when he was an arhat, even when he was walking around, people still knew he was Angulimala. They still threw rocks at him. They did all kinds of stuff. And he came to the Buddha and he told him about this, and the Buddha said, endure. The Buddha had pains. There's a wonderful sutta called, I think it's just called Old Age, where you see the Buddha, it opens with the Buddha being an old man, and he's warming his back by the last rays of the sun, and Ananda is massaging his limbs and stuff like that. Even an awakened being has this body, and because you have this body, you're going to have all these issues. But an awakened being is not going to suffer from that. If an awakened being gets chopped in half, they'll feel pain, they'll die, but they're not going to mentally suffer for it. That's the difference. Or even in the suttas, the Buddha would say stuff like, this is tiresome, that this will tire me out, or I have to go rest. He's not resting because this teaching stuff is really, He's resting because, this body is tired, and this mind is tired. It needs rest. So it's going to rest. So. Was the Buddha once as messed up, confused, and deluded as we often are? Yes! Yes! And that's what this makes it so amazing, is that he was us. He was later traditions and stuff make him out to be this guy with these 32 marks of a great man and all of this stuff, and make him omniscient and all of these, they I don't know what the word is, deize him. They make him into like a more than human person. But he wasn't. That's the amazing thing about this. He was just like us. When there's wonderful suttas where a king will come to try to find the Buddha, and there'll be like a sea of monastics, and they'll be like, well, where's the Buddha? I'm trying to find the Buddha. They couldn't see the Buddha among all the other monks, right? So he's not like this, it's like this, some of the marks are like he has like glowing. You see like pictures like with like a halo, all these kind of things. He was just like us. That's the amazing part about this. This is just what I talked about Dukkha this afternoon. If he wasn't like us, well then the whole thing would be useless. We wouldn't have the ability to let go of dukkha. We wouldn't have the ability to follow his path. But he was just like us. That's what's so amazing about this. Now, the only difference I will say is this. Any kind of extra abilities and powers and all these kind of things that he might have had was because he practiced these, these various aspects. I'm trying to think of what the words. There's the 10. It eludes me now. But there's these 10 things to practice that lead you towards becoming a Buddha. And it's actually something that's part of the Bodhisattva vow and all that kind of stuff. I know the word's going to come to me probably. Parami, yes, thank you very much. So he practiced these 10 paramis, and he made the decision many, many lifetimes ago to become a Buddha. And because of that, there's kind of just, because of that, he was able to teach people better than anybody else and all these kind of things. But that doesn't mean that he was any different than us. He still had, he was still messed up, confused, and deluded. And so that's a wonderful message. Wherever you're at, you can get there. You can change yourself. You can make yourself better. Just have to keep practicing. Don't give up. In some formulations of Buddhist influence, Japanese culture, there is the compelling notion that it is the impermanence of beautiful, enjoyable experience, i.e. cherry blossoms, that makes them all the more enjoyable and beautiful. How does this relate to the problem of clinging? It's hard to really kind of give a clear answer to this because it is something that's of a different tradition and a different textual background and all this kind of stuff. Now, what I will say is that when you practice mindfulness, when you intentionally slow down your life and you're mindful, you start to see things in a different light. You start to see details that you didn't see. Ajahn Brahm uses the example of he used to, drive up to his monastery or be driven up to his monastery, and the example of being in a car and you see things passing by and you see things. Oh, okay, yeah, I see this and this and this. But one time he walked that, and while he was walking, he noticed things he never saw before. That's like mindfulness, right? And he saw all these beautiful things and experienced and saw all this stuff he didn't see before. So when you're mindful, you see these things, and you can appreciate that. Your mind says this is beautiful. You have this emotional reaction to this experience. You can appreciate that, but you can do it in a mindful way, and you can let it come and you can let it go. The key there is to not be attached to it. If something's beautiful, that's fine. Beauty is a concept. That's not you might think something's beautiful, another person might think, well, that's not beautiful, right? So you can even examine it in that regard. My perceptions, my conditioning is saying this is this way. Is it really? Or is it just because this is how I think? So you can be mindful of the experience, let it go, and examine that experience. Use it as what they call teachable moment or whatever. Is mind and body the same? If yes, why mind is different? I don't know what that is. Any suggestions? No, mind and body is not the same. They are, they come together in this psychophysical being, but it's not the same. And they come together as part of the 5 aggregates, but they are different in regards to the in regards to form I'm trying to think of a really good answer for this as to why they're not the same. Why is mind different? Oh, I think that's control. Is that difficult to control? Okay. I can give an answer to that. The Buddha was speaking to, in one of the sutras, the Buddha is speaking to a guy, and he says, talking about what you can take as self. And he said, can you take the body as self? Can you take the mind as self? And he asked the Buddha these questions. And the Buddha's answer was, if you have to take something as self, better take the body, because the mind is changing so fast that you can't even see. He says the body you can see to be here for 10 years, 20, the body itself changes, but the body is there. But the mind is always changing very fast. So that is why the mind is difficult to control. It's also difficult to control because you're trying to control it. The controlling is an expectation. It's a desire. I don't like this stuff in my mind. I don't want to have anything to do with it. You have to accept what comes in your mind because it is what it is. It came into your mind. And it came into your mind because you set the groundwork for it in the past. Thoughts and stuff like that come into your mind are actually your karma. You set the groundwork for these thoughts to come into your mind. But it's at that point where you can either propagate that thought and send it and agree with it and send it around to come back again, or you can say, I don't have to accept that thought. I'm not going to push it forward. I'm not going to accept it as me. I'm not going to identify with it as, I'm not going to accept it as mine or identify with it as myself or me. I'm just going to let it go as it came. I'm not going to attach to it. And then that is when you actually control the mind, because you control it by insight, by seeing, and then by letting go. If you try to fight your mind will win. It's as simple as that. Your mind is stronger than you. Mindfulness. I think of it as being present in the moment with the object / task at hand. Is this correct? Could you please discuss mindfulness? This is a big topic. Let me see if I can do this in a speedy way. The Buddhist term most often used for mindfulness is sati, S-A-T-I. And the definition for sati is actually based on recollection. It's based on keeping something in mind, or like memory, reminding yourself of keeping something in your mind. So this kind of non-judgmental awareness is not really what fits into what we think of as sati, of mindfulness. And so I can go on with this and actually spend another hour going into this, but there's a couple different words that all come together to encapsulate what we think of as mindfulness. So, after saying that, I'll give you Bhante G's definition of mindfulness. Bhante G's definition of mindfulness is being aware of what's happening in the present moment with your mind and body, without greed, hatred, or delusion. So you're seeing something, not objectively, because you can't see the experience is subjective. You can't really see anything objectively in your mind and body. You're experiencing a subjective reality. But you can do that with an equanimous mind. And by that means is when things are coming up, the I like or I dislike or I attach or I have an aversion to it, that all clouds us to seeing things with insight, to seeing things as they truly are. When you are able to see with mindfulness, you're able to see it without all of this extra added junk, all of this like and dislike and greed and hatred and delusion and all of it, and even seeing something, when you're seeing something mindful, you're also seeing it not through the lens of a self either. You're seeing it as it is. Seeing it, looking at it as a process, seeing what this process is about. So, since Bhante Ji is the abbot here, I'll stick with his definition. I don't know how qualified I am to go too much into detail, scholarly detail otherwise. Why is it that restlessness is the second to last fetter to be abandoned? Is this the same as the hindrance of restlessness? Why is restlessness a bigger obstacle to enlightenment than desire or ill will? I actually just learned the answer to this question probably about a month ago, because we asked the same question. The restlessness is actually different than the hindrance of restlessness at that point. The restlessness at that point is the restlessness of wanting to get it over. You're this close to becoming awakened. This close. You're almost there. And you really want to, you're just like, okay, I see the end in sight. And I really want to get to that end. That's that restlessness. As opposed to the restlessness, which is more of a, I guess you can say that's more of the fine remnants of restlessness, whereas the hindrance of restlessness is the gross end of restlessness. Where we're worrying about all kinds of sensual pleasures and all these kinds of things, and fears and all this. At that point, where the only thing pretty much that's left is restlessness and ignorance. You've gotten past a lot of that, but not all of it, not quite. So, are we as we are a bundle of processes with no permanent I, no self, that is eternal, who is reborn and goes, oh no, not again. This question is the most asked question pretty much in Buddhism. Every retreat I've been to, every Q&A I've ever listened to a monastic, everybody, at least once, this question comes up. It's a very, very, very common question. I've heard Bhante Ji answer it probably at least 24 times, something like that. And actually, it's the good answer to the question is invalid question. It's not in these Nikayas that I'm telling you guys about. I'm almost to the end of reading them. I haven't quite read all of them yet, but I've never seen the Buddha say, talk about the specifics of what goes on, what moves on. A couple times he's just said flatly, the mind. The body dies and the mind moves on. So that's pretty much as in detail as he was going to get. Now, the thing to remember is the mind is also not, the mind is this process. Everything, if you study dependent origination, you see that everything is a process. It's all processes. And it's all happening. It's all coming together due to previous causes and conditions. And it arises for a time. It persists with alteration, meaning it's around for a time, but it's always changing. It never stays the same. Just like us, right? We lived, I've lived almost 40 years. You guys lived however long you've lived. We've been around, but at one point I was like this. Now I'm like this. And then soon enough I'm going to start hunching over, and then I'm going to be gone. I'm going to be dead. And I'm going to be, reborn according to my karma. So everything is always changing. And we can see this as who is reborn. Really, in a way, it doesn't matter. It doesn't affect our practice if we knew the specifics of exactly what is reborn and how exactly the mind goes from this body to another body and all of these things. These are all things that we're not going to find with intellectualizing. We're not going to know those answers. They get in the way. But when you get to a point where you see these things with insight, then you have a better example. You understand it. You see it with your own insight. I can't say much about that because I'm not there yet. That's just what the Buddha says. Oh. Okay. I don't know if I'm going to be able to finish all of these. Well, what I usually do if we run over time is this. Raise your hand if you want to keep going. Raise your hand if you don't want to keep going. Okay. So at this point, I'll keep going for a little while. I'm not going to do it for another hour. It's too much. But if you need to get up, if you need to go to the bathroom, if you need to leave, you want to go take a break, that's fine. You're not disrespecting me if you walk up and get out. It's one of the interesting things I found learning about Buddhist culture is that even during like the most what you think of a sanctimonious thing like an ordination, people are coming in, people are going out, people are taking pictures, people are on their phones. It's not so. Don't worry, you're not going to offend me if you have to leave. I felt very pessimistic after this afternoon's talk on dukkha. I love life. I think what we experience here on earth is beautiful and should be celebrated, not lamented, as a temporary suffering until we move on. Perhaps my pessimism is based on my misunderstanding of the core concept. Is there an easy, quick way to guide me in the right direction? I think the best way for me to answer this is to answer with sankhara dukkha, right? The dukkha of conditioned existence. You don't move to want to get out of samsara without a couple things. The first thing is disenchantment. And by disenchantment, I'm not talking about aversion. Oh, the world sucks. I can't stand people. Was a good thing. The definition of hell is other people. Sometimes you see monks that are like that. I don't know. I can't subscribe to that. But that's not a disenchantment. That is an aversion. Disenchantment is seeing it all, what you would be considered the good and the bad, and saying, there's something better. This is nice. This is good. But I see and I think that there's something better. I'm going to go for that. When you start to see that, when you have the unsatisfactoriness of conditioned existence, you look to go beyond that. You don't want to, you don't take pleasure in what you used to take pleasure in before. It's kind of one of the Buddha uses the simile of a sandcastle. When children are playing with the sandcastle, they love it, and it's amazing, and they're so happy about it. But then once they're done with it, once they don't have any more desire for it, they destroy it. They don't give a crap about it anymore. Like a child with a toy, right? A child loves their toy, and then these days, the next week there's another toy, and they're like, the toy that they loved is now thrown in there in the corner, and they never play with it again. So that is what a disenchantment is, a dispassion. You don't have this. You don't take the same amount of enjoyment in something that others still do. and you see something like the Buddha's offering you something better, and you say, well, you know what? I'm going to go for that. You know, I'll use myself as an example. I had a very wonderful lay life. I had a career. I had my own business. I traveled. I had no complaints in terms of what somebody would say. If somebody would want a good lay life to not complain about, I had it. I still gave it up to follow this. And it's because I saw the possibility for something better. It's not because I hated the world. It's not because, if you have wonderful experiences on the planet, there are wonderful experiences on the planet. But when you reach a point, in the suttas it's called dust in your eyes. In the beginning, the story goes that the Buddha became awakened and he looked and he saw everybody and he says, I'm not teaching, that's going to be a pain in the butt. I'm just going to chill and then I'm just going to pass away and be gone. And, so the story goes that, somebody came or a guide came or he saw, it depends on the story. But then he said that he saw that there's people with little dust in their eyes who would be lost if I didn't teach. So he said, you know what? Okay, I'm going to teach. So he went out and he taught. So the reason why I love dukkha being thought of as difficult to bear is because it meets you where you're at. For most people, difficult to bear is old age, sickness, and death. For some people, difficult to bear is all of conditioned existence. So wherever you're at, it's okay. It's okay that there's good things on this planet. It's okay that there's people doing good things and all these kind of experiences. But it depends on where you're at and it depends on the different levels. The image of the arrow striking once or twice was very helpful. It sounds like the Buddha acknowledges that we continue to have feelings when things happen to us. Is it true then that suffering comes when we let life's challenges take over? To put another way, is suffering when we wallow in the challenges of life? Wallow. I guess I could say that is a form of suffering. Yeah. The wallowing is like an aversion. It's like trying to hide away. Like, this is horrible, but maybe it's even like being lackadaisical, like you don't know what to do or you don't want to do something. You just want to wallow in self-pity or wallow in, sadness or whatever. But that's not the Buddha's way. The Buddha's way is effort and energy and doing this practice to change yourself. And in changing yourself, you change the world around you. So life is a challenge, but if you look at life as giving you lessons, then it's a challenge to learn from. If everything is teaching you, then you're not so much suffering as learning. And it's a good way to look at life, and it's a good way to develop insight. I'm unaware of where the Buddha says we are the five aggregates. I've only seen him talk in the suttas about the five aggregates as suffering. If the Buddha did say we are five aggregates, can you point to where he said that? There's so many suttas that talk about the five aggregates. I can't really point to one in particular. Although in the Samyutta Nikaya, the Samyutta Nikaya has 57 Samyuttas. And what that is a group discourse. So there's the Khanda Sanyutta, and that is the Sanyutta about the 5 aggregates. And there's dozens and dozens of suttas about the 5 aggregates. So if it's in there, that's probably the best place to look. To clarify, craving isn't the same as attachment? Question mark. Attachment is a source or cause of craving, as are aversion and ignorance. Attachment is a root of craving. It comes out of craving. Same as aversion. Craving is, when we think of craving, we think of like, ooh, craving for good donuts, or craving for this, or craving for that. But if you have a painful experience, you're craving to not have that painful experience. That's your aversion. So both attachment and aversion come from craving. Whether craving to have a pleasant experience or craving to not have an unpleasant experience. I'm going to make this my last question because I'm not going to get through all this, unfortunately. But this is, I think, a good question to end on. Can you speak a bit about how to apply the teachings in order to bear witness to others' suffering? For example, in current fields such as social work, to avoid emotional burnout. Applying the teachings, when you apply the teachings to something like this, and I understood, a couple of people in my group today, we all kind of were from the same field, so we started talking about this, and we kind of understand this social work aspect. When you're working to help others, it's very easy to burn yourself out. It's very easy to put others in front of yourself. The Buddha doesn't believe in doing that. The Buddha believes in putting yourself with others. So yourself and others, you're just as equally as important as everybody else. In metta, when he says, so above, below, and all around, to all as to themselves, one abides pervading the whole world, the all-encompassing world, with a mind imbued of goodwill. Right? So he's not saying everybody else, he's saying yourself and everybody else, all of us. So when you're doing this, how to bear witness to others' suffering, the teaching, the practice allows you to see a wider view, right? You start to understand what suffering is. You start to understand how your mind works. And in doing that, you start to understand how other people suffer and how other people's minds work. Because in all reality, all our minds are pretty much the same. We all have different experiences and things like that, but in all reality, the human mind the mind is not that much different in terms of how it works. And so when you understand how your mind works, and when you understand that you want to be happy, that you don't want to harm somebody, that you would like to live life in peace, you understand that other people would like the same. The problem with existence is not that there's good and bad people. It's that the problem is that we're all trying to find happiness. We're all trying to find peace. But we don't know how the hell to do it. And so we're going like ping pong balls trying to find peace. And sometimes what we do bangs into other people and we harm other people or other people harm us. And so when you're able to kind of be able to step back from that and to see a wider picture of it, you take yourself out of it. You don't take things personally anymore. Right? When you're with a client and they're angry and and they might even say something, they might curse you out or whatever. Don't take it personally. You understand what they're going through. You know what they're doing. You know what is in their mind. You know what anger does to somebody's mind. Why would you take it personally? Right? So you understand this person's suffering. You're not wrapped up in that person's suffering. And so you know with a clear head